Ever wondered what really goes on in the lives of notorious gangsters beyond the glamour and crime? When we think about gangsters, we often think of power, wealth, and a life of excitement. But there's a darker reality that's often overlooked. The truth is, gangsters are responsible for unimaginable suffering, and their actions have far-reaching consequences that affect entire communities and families. In this video, we're going to explore the darker side of gangster culture and what really goes on behind the scenes. Gangsters are often romanticized in movies, TV shows, and books, making them seem like heroes or anti-heroes. But the reality is, they're criminals who commit heinous crimes, destroy lives, and leave a trail of destruction in their wake. The media often focuses on the flashy cars, the expensive suits, and the glorified violence. But what about the real-life consequences of their actions? What about the families who are torn apart, the businesses that are ruined, and the communities that are ravaged by crime and fear? And speaking of gangsters and their impact, we've created a collection of true crime-inspired designs that you can check out on histoedutainment.com. These pieces capture the gritty reality behind the glamour, shedding light on the dark legacy of infamous figures. So if you're into true crime history and want to wear a piece of it, visit our store today. The glamorization of gangsters in media is a complex issue, and it's one that has serious implications. By making gangsters seem cool and desirable, we're sending a dangerous message to our youth. We're telling them that crime pays, that violence is an acceptable way to solve problems, and that the ends justify the means. But the truth is, there are no winners in the world of gangsterism. Everyone loses, including the gangsters themselves. The media's portrayal of gangsters also perpetuates a cycle of violence and retaliation. When we see gangsters as heroes, we're more likely to justify their actions and even emulate them. But in reality, gangsterism is a dead-end road that leads to destruction, imprisonment, and death. We need to take a step back and look at the real-life consequences of gangster culture and the devastating impact it has on our communities. The glamorization of gangsters also stems from our own fascination with the darker aspects of human nature. We're drawn to the excitement, the danger, and the thrill of the unknown. But by focusing on these aspects, we're ignoring the very real people who are affected by gangsterism. We're ignoring the victims, the families, and the communities who are torn apart by crime and violence. The reality is, gangsters are not heroes, they're not anti-heroes, and they're not even villains. They're human beings who have made a choice to engage in criminal activity, and that choice has consequences. We need to start recognizing the true impact of gangsterism and the devastating effects it has on our society. Gangsters have been a part of human history for centuries, and they've left their mark on our world. From the notorious mobs of the 1920s to the modern-day drug cartels, gangsters have been responsible for some of the most heinous crimes in history. But what drives them to commit such atrocities? What makes them tick? And what's the real story behind their rise to power? Let's take a look at the case of Al Capone, one of the most infamous gangsters in American history. Capone rose to power during the Prohibition era, and he quickly became one of the most powerful men in Chicago. He was known for his brutal tactics, his lavish lifestyle, and his seemingly untouchable status. But beneath the surface, Capone was a complex and troubled individual, driven by a desire for power and a need for control. Capone's rise to power was swift and brutal. He started out as a small-time hood, but he quickly rose through the ranks, becoming one of the most feared men in Chicago. He was responsible for countless crimes, including murder, extortion, and bribery. But despite his brutal tactics, Capone was seen as a folk hero by many. He was a symbol of rebellion, a man who defied the authorities and lived by his own rules. But beneath the surface, Capone's life was one of chaos and destruction. He was plagued by mental health issues, and his relationships were marked by violence and betrayal. His downfall was swift and brutal, and it marked the beginning of the end of the golden age of gangsterism. Another infamous gangster is Pablo Escobar, the Colombian drug lord who terrorized communities and governments alike. Escobar's rise to power was marked by brutal violence, and his reign was characterized by bribery, corruption, and murder. But despite his heinous crimes, Escobar was seen as a hero by many in his community. He was a man who had risen from nothing, and he was willing to do whatever it took to protect his family and his business. Escobar's downfall was just as brutal as his rise to power. He was killed in a shootout with Colombian police, and his empire crumbled around him. But despite his death, Escobar's legacy lives on, and he remains one of the most infamous gangsters in history. These case studies are just a few examples of the many gangsters who have shaped our world. They're a testament to the destructive power of gangsterism and the devastating impact it has on our communities. But there's one pivotal moment in the history of one of these gangsters that underscores the dark reality of their life and the lives they affected. It's the moment when Al Capone's 11-year-old son, Sonny, contracted syphilis from a prostitute. Capone was devastated, and he spent the rest of his life trying to make amends. This moment marks a turning point in Capone's life, and it's a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of his actions. In conclusion, the glamorization of gangsters in media masks the real-life consequences of their actions on communities and families. By recognizing the true impact of gangsterism, we can start to break the cycle of violence and retaliation. We can start to see gangsters for what they are, human beings who have made a choice to engage in criminal activity, and that choice has consequences. We need to start having a more nuanced conversation about gangster culture and the devastating impact it has on our society. We need to recognize the victims, the families, and the communities who are torn apart by crime and violence. And we need to start taking responsibility for our own role in perpetuating the glamorization of gangsters. What are your thoughts on gangster portrayals in media? Do you think they're glamorized too much? Let us know in the comments below and check out our next video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos on true crime history.